there's a lot of work that you've been doing aside from your main work as an author, a speaker, a coach. You've taken a lot of the initiative as a philanthropist. I mean, in the process, you've written 9 self-help books. You've reached #1 on Amazon with 2 of them. And you've been doing a ton of charity work as well. And for most people who are maybe doing sales, looking at your resume, I would be surprised that anybody would have the time to be able to do the kinds of activities that are more philanthropic when it seems like you're doing so much on the business front. Has it always been this way where you've been able to find that extra time, or were you able to kind of discover a few tricks there along the road that made you have a lot more time to be able to pursue these efforts that seem a lot more aligned to your greater purpose?
It's a good question. And the resume sounds like it's all happening all at the same time, but it's definitely happening in seasons. And I think that's really important for the listener to understand that most of the philanthropic work and the books and a lot of that was different seasons for me. So the short of it is, most of us go through different seasons. Spring season where we're planting seeds for what we deem are our new priorities. The summer season where we're taking care of those and working and grinding on that one thing. The fall season where we're reaping the harvest of those seeds that we planted. And then the unpredictable winter season that comes through and we just navigate it with our minimum viable product to have the least amount of consequences. And then we get ready to plant the next seeds for the next spring. So I'm a firm believer in the cycles of those seasons. So when I have been in a spring season intentionally planting those seeds, I figure out what are my priorities. So when I wanted to start the charity, the PB&J for Tampa Bay, where we provided 100,000 meals to the less fortunate, it didn't start as like, let me go feed 100,000 people. It started as there was a sales rep in my office who broke up with his girlfriend, and I said, how could we get off self and on purpose? And we brainstormed a bunch of ideas. It's like, what if we just made some sandwiches and fed them to some people and, have a perspective shift, like a Tony Robbinism. He's like, yeah, let's do it. So we got 7 other sales reps and we raised up some donations from our clients and we made 350 sandwiches, passed them out. He's like, that was awesome. Let's do it again. So we did it again the next month, made 500 sandwiches. And then we did it every single month from 2015 until COVID. And then I offloaded it to an operator who now runs it, Tyler. And he still does feeding frenzies every single month. And after we hit 100,000, I passed the baton to him because my son was born, which led us to another season. And that season of unpredictability with my son, we were in the NICU with him for 8.5 months. So for 254 days. So during that season of winter, I didn't know how long winter season was going to be. But because I planted these seeds in my business that we can talk about of putting systems in place for predictability so I can work from home and be a more present dad, because my dad works 6 days a week in his plumbing business and missed a lot of basketball games. So circa 2016 or 17, I installed systems in my business, hired a business coach to corporatize my direct sales business. And I didn't know that we were going to be in the hospital for 8.5 months, but I did know I wanted to work from home and have time freedom as a present dad. So I had to kind of take the JFK quote, work on the roof when the sun is shining. So that's what I did. And in 2020, December 31st, New Year's Eve, 2020, when he was born at 1 pound, 4 ounces, my business ran without me for 8.5 months. And during that time, still produced $250,000 in revenue. We still provided about 600 jobs and positions and recruited, again, 600 people. We did right at about $1.8 million in sales without me there. And it was a really good testament to the systems that was created. Now, the year prior, don't get me wrong, when I was there and we weren't in the hospital, we were flourishing. We did awesome. We did almost $2.5 million in sales, provided almost 1,000 jobs. So there was a dip without me, but it was still pretty great. It's, like Dan Martell says in his book, 80% done by someone else is 100% awesome. So that's kind of what has happened with the PB&J for Tampa Bay. That's kind of what happened with my direct sales business. And now at this chapter, my son is doing great. He's 3. He's thriving. And my daughter was just born. She's 5 months old. So we have completed our family. I'll be 39 this June. And for us to be at this season where now I can fully work from home, I fully have time freedom. Now I'm teaching other business owners how to do that. How do you create time freedom for yourself and not have to, be the slave to the business, to work 24/7 that I felt like I was working in the past? And how could you leverage your business as a vehicle for your life versus being your life?
Oh man. There's so many little nuggets I want to pull on from what you just said right there, but what an incredible journey. And you've unpacked a few of these cool mechanisms you have in place. And the first one I want to kind of poke at is where you started with this whole concept of seasons. And I can't help but think of my own life where there's times where I felt very lost and I was realizing the business I was at, it didn't make sense. It didn't align. I felt kind of anxious. And it didn't correlate necessarily with the season on a temperature period, but I've seen myself fall into that cycle before. And I can't help but make a shout out to one of my work colleague, James, who I see him would find himself, maybe it was maybe on a yearly cycle. He would go into these repeated patterns that he was trying to shed, but it would drag him back and he was trying to understand what the hell was going on. So can you tell us a bit more about this season's work and like what are things that we're supposed to look for to understand which season that we're in? And if we are in one of those unpredictable winters, or should we be trying to get out of it as soon as possible?
It's a good question. I'll start with winter because that's a season I've had a lot of experience with. Unfortunately, because the season of winter is challenging as we're going through it. But the gifts that I've gotten from those winter seasons, whether it be death of mom when I was 20 or the market collapse when I was in debt $130,000 with a 400 credit score near bankrupt, or the season of a 7-year relationship ending, or the season of miscarriage of our first child or IVF. I mean, we could go, I feel like my life is an example of what it means to navigate winter season, as fortunate or unfortunate as that might be. But what I have found is there's 3 approaches to winter, the season of unpredictability. Way number 1 is what I have learned for myself, which is to create an MVP, a minimum viable product that has the least amount of consequences, because I know spring always follows winter. So it always follows winter, and it's just how long is the winter season going to be? So it's just, I want to have the least amount of consequences for when I get out of the season. I at least have enough energy and enough poise and focus to plant some sort of seeds that I could recover from the season with. So for me, when we were in the hospital, as an example, it was, can I do 60,000 steps a week? And can I journal? Like, can I not even journal? I didn't even feel like writing. I wanted to read my affirmations. It was called Dad Activities. And I made a list of like 50 activities I was looking forward to do with my son when he was in the incubator, to kind of give me an opportunity to move my body, because motion creates emotion. And for me to kind of have this, painting this vision for myself of what I get to look forward to in the future. And that was it. Everything else was bonus. So that was a strategy number 1 of an MVP. Number 2 for winter is to try to shovel the snow as the snow is coming down. But we obviously know the strategy there is trying to work our way out of the winter season, which is only going to fatigue us for when spring comes around. So if we know spring eventually comes and then we're fatigued from winter, we're kind of beat the crap out of us. Now we don't have the energetic capacity to really plant the seeds that we want to plant in spring. So now we're just kind of like, we've grinded ourselves down to a part of ourselves that we really can't. Maybe we're at like a 30% capacity versus a 90% capacity. We're not rejuvenated, recharged in a way to really be intentional. So that leads in number 3, which is a complete paradigm shift, which says, oh, this is winter. Let me go get some skis and sleds and just enjoy this snowstorm, right? And that is a complete different shift that is very challenging for someone to adopt, because it is finding the gift in the moment. A lot of times the winter for me has been so painful and challenging that it's really tough to find the gift in the moment. I find the gift after the moment. But if there's a way to find the gift in the moment and turn it into a gift, to enjoy it as much as possible and find this as this new circumstance is actually a really great blessing, that would be an optimal way to navigate winter, but often it's easier said than done. So that's winter. I could jam on the other 3 unless you kick it back to you.
Well, I'll take a moment to kind of go into that winter space, because strategy number 3 is very interesting. And call it my action bias or my hustler bias, and maybe that's some things I might have to investigate within myself as well. But there's always a fear for me to look at that third option, because I'm like, oh, does that mean I'm like distracting myself? Does it mean I'm being lazy? And there's a lot of labels that I put into doing those kinds of activities in the moment of a winter season. Is that something that I still need to keep a pulse on? Is there are there different types of activities that would be considered a healthy version of it or an unhealthy version of it?
I think the situation is the boss. Because there's distractions and then there's healthy distractions. Who said that? Phil Mickelson, the golfer. He said, I had the tendency for addiction and for habits, but there were healthy ones and there were unhealthy ones. The unhealthy ones is when I wanted to go to the bar and drink with my friends, but the healthy ones was when I wouldn't leave the golf course until I sank 106-foot putts, and I would intentionally miss the 98th putt. So that way I had to do it all over again because I wouldn't leave the course until I made 100 in a row. So it was a healthy habit, but at the same time, it was still an addiction. But there's a healthy version of it and an unhealthy version with it. I think the awareness, only you as the human will know. Number one, is it an actual addiction or is it a habitual pattern to like distract ourselves or numb ourselves from feeling? Number two, is it healthy or unhealthy? And number three, the awareness of, is this actually a numbing mechanism so I don't have to experience the actual pain of the season or the uncertainty of the season? Only the human can really tell. And that's kind of that inner work that I would invite during a fall season. So the fall season, I guess I'm kind of going backwards here, but the fall season is the season of self-reflection and introspection because we've bared the fruit. We're not going out hunting or planting anymore. We got what we went. We got the kill. We got the fruits. We have the money. We got the reward of whatever it is that we were pursuing. We got. Now it's taking that time to, like, number one, enjoy it as much as possible, but then number two, conserve the resources for that winter season, making sure we're investing the money the right way and conserving it the appropriate way. And that's where we sharpen the axe a little bit. Prepare, this is where we might like develop our skills, develop our intuition. This is where we might do some, coaching or learning or practicing or role play. Like that's that season of fall, which is a lot of strategy, inner strategy, business strategy, like those types of approaches. I love fall season. A lot of people love fall season, but they don't take the time because they feel like, to your point, fall, I feel like I'm lazy. I'm not grinding. I'm not working so much in the business. I'm lazy. That's not the case at all. We're working on ourselves and on our business in a fall season because too many people get stuck in the summer, which is grind, focus on the one thing, get the result, which is a great season, is very important. But what happens is they just keep moving the goalpost. So it's like I hit it, and instead of going into a fall season, they're like, let me just move the goalpost to just continue work towards a result. And that's that summer. See, summer's easy. Summer is like easy to understand because most entrepreneurs just stay in that summer season. So I don't have to elaborate too much on that. But the spring is, again, similar to a fall where it's like, this is where a lot of reflection, journaling, but this is where I'm planting the vision more so. So I'm like, these are the steps I'm taking. This is like marketing, a season of marketing and putting feelers out there, brand development, market research. This is like, I know this new product or this new service or this new initiative or this new project. Just making sure that in spring, the number one focus that I would invite someone to have is keep in mind that whatever fruit you want to bear in fall are going to be planted in spring. So if you want a business that does not require you to be the bottleneck, you need to build that business in spring so that way in fall you can reap the rewards. Because if you set up a business where it's like, everyone just call me, I just want to make as many sales as possible. Then in fall, when you try to go on vacation with your family, you're like, everyone's calling you to make these sales, but you set up a business to make money, not necessarily a business that could have time freedom. So using this example, being strategic in spring is going to be important to kind of vision cast a little bit of what you want fall to look like. So I love the seasons analogy. Jim Rohn has his book, The Season of Life. This is just my spin on his philosophy and something that's kind of served me for the better part of a decade or more.
I love it. And I do want to give kudos for crediting some of the sources. I've noticed you doing that a lot, and I do appreciate that because I tend to do the same because I find there's so much wisdom that exists everywhere. And if we're able to put it together and put it into practice, then you will get to be the fruit of the labor that everybody else pointed as well. So I do want to acknowledge that.
We're all standing on the giants of people before us. So that's how I believe, at least.
True that. And I really love this season system. And just out of a kind of a break a myth or a hypothesis. Does the seasonality of weather, temperature, like I've been on the northern hemisphere when I lived in Canada, does that actually pull us to fall into those seasons, or is it completely irrelevant?
So it's a mindset shift, because I had someone say, well, I live in Arizona and there's a lot of desert over here, so it's just a desert season all the time. I said, that right there would be the epitome, using the Canada. It's always like snow up here. It's always winter, right? The epitome of what I would say is someone that is blaming like they're blaming their outside of them, like they're taking away their ability to leverage their influence. It's like I'm removing myself from actually getting something done. This would be the blame game, where it's like, well, this is just because this is where I live, so this is how it is. Well, it's like, well, as Tony Robbins would say, go move, right? Go move. If your emotional home is the desert, then go move away from the desert, because your emotional home is actually not serving you as a human or serving your purpose of what you're meant to live. So move that emotional home. So it's very much an emotion more so than a physical type of experience. But I would invite that person to say, why is that your emotional home? Why is the default to say, well, this is just where I live. I always live in this type of environment. I always live where it's summer. That's just what I'm accustomed to. It's like, well, let's explore that. Why? Where does that come from? Well, whose love did you try to crave as a kid? Your mom or your dad? Okay, how did you crave that love? Probably because you were an overachiever, and every time you did something good, you were a good boy, and every time you did something bad, you were a bad boy. So therefore, you put on this lens of like, I only can get good boy notions when I do stuff in the outside world. And great, now with that awareness, we can interrupt the pattern. That's not the truth. That was your parent doing the best job that they possibly could with what they knew how to do. But you are no longer an 11-year-old kid that needs the validation from mom or dad. You actually are grown up, and you could interrupt the pattern and reparent that 11-year-old version of you and move into the grown up version of you, the mature version of you, to figure out what is the truth. And the truth is that the seasons of life, the truth is, every season serves its purpose, and we want to make sure we have the ability to navigate those seasons, and it's inside of our control. So I just never want to be a victim. And for those that might want to try to use a circumstance as an opportunity to be a victim, I just don't play to it.
Fair enough. For me, I know that, I've been in all these seasons, and I didn't necessarily follow a 1-year cycle. I've seen it being on different timelines depending on what's going on. And you even alluded to the fact that you had a pretty long winter that happened when you were in the ICU or the NICU. I did want to switch gears, because there's another thing I picked on when you did your opening that I thought was very interesting. Is you talked about a friend that had a recent breakup, and how when they found themselves maybe down from that situation, you talked about how to stop being so focused on me and instead focus on purpose. You said something along those lines, and I wanted to understand what that strategy is, and in what circumstances are they helpful for somebody.
Off self, on purpose. Again, a great Tony Robbinsism, I call it. I'm a 7-time fire walker, so I travel with Tony to a lot of different events, and did a date with Destiny with my wife. That was our honeymoon. But she had her honeymoon and I had my honeymoon. My honeymoon was Date with Destiny, 6 days of Tony Robbins. So that's something that I've learned and picked up from him, which is off self, on purpose. And anytime we feel stuck, typically it's because we're just focusing on ourselves. We're not focusing on anything outside of us. So if we could get beyond self, or the inner game, we can call it, and then start focusing a little bit on service or other people's, and getting a little bit of perspective from a purpose, or using another word might be contribution, like giving to a cause that you deem worthy of your time or energy or your resources. Oftentimes you will notice that the feeling of like, wow, I don't feel so stuck anymore. And the reason why is because there's a chemical that we have called oxytocin. That oxytocin is the contribution chemical that starts getting activated in our body when we do random acts of kindness. So in the Jewish faith, we call it a mitzvah. So my parents and my dad specifically have raised me to do mitzvahs as a kid. And that's, I think, kind of like taking its shape into adulthood as well. It's just doing these random acts of kindness, not because I want to post it on social media. It's just because I want to, number one, selfishly, the positive self-interest, as Jim Rohn says, it's not selfish, it's a positive self-interest, is I want to feel good. And what makes me feel good is when my oxytocin goes up, when my cortisol level goes down, right? Too many times people try to get dopamine hits, the dopamine, the caffeine or the alcohol or the social media clicks or the likes or loves, like those are dopamine. Those are like that's like lighter fluid. What I want to do is the oxytocin is more like coals, like it just burns a little slower, a little deeper. Endorphins is another one of those chemicals. Like, you could run or do a physical activity to kind of get that energy. So off self on purpose. It's just a great, simple, like flip of the switch, and knowing what it's doing is just actually creating different chemical triggers in the body to create a different emotion or energy for us to be a little bit more present with whatever it is that we're focused on or want to be focused on.
I love that. I don't know if you could tell, but I'm just not as exposed to Tony Robbins material. So everything you're telling me, I'm like, wow, I never heard this before. And I think that might be a consequence. Like, I've been with Mind Valley for so long, so I've been exposed to a lot of different teachers from that front, but we never actually did work with Tony during my time there. So I haven't been exposed to his materials as well. So this is all coming fresh to me, and I'm hoping for anybody tuning in as well, they're going to be getting that kind of insight. But I actually want to speak more about the fact that you speak a lot about being better than rich. And I found that was a very interesting twist, since a lot of people who might be listening to this show right now, getting rich seems to be the first goal. Like, it's like, if only I could get to a certain amount of money, that's when things start turning around. That's when I'll get what I've been searching for. And for you, it seems like you're working with people that have kind of reached that goal, but they've faced a different problem when they've gotten there. And I'd love for you to kind of speak to that journey of going for the money, but then realizing that maybe there's something else we need to be looking at that might be a bit more effective than just the money.
Well, to honor time, I'll go with the short version. And then, of course, if we want to poke around, we could go into any direction, or a longer version, or whatever will serve. So the short version is, when I was in that hole, breakup ended, near bankrupt, living in a shitty apartment in Clearwater. Sorry, I just cursed. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but
no, you're allowed to curse.
So
it is fine on this podcast. Okay. We allow it. Sorry for those who are sensitive to that word, but poop will be mentioned.
So living in a poopy apartment, and I really didn't want to get off the couch. And then to make it even worse, my college roommate, my best friend at the time, was killed in a fatal car crash. So I was just in a deep, deep, deep valley, like not wanting to get off the couch. And I was the owner of my direct sales company at the time. And I'm like, I just don't give a crap. So from that place is when I went to my first Tony Robbins event. I walked across fire, and he said, "My mess is my message." So from that place, I decided to speak at the schools. So I spent that next 12 months pretty much speaking in the Pinellas County School District, about 20 to 30,000 students, 300 hours crafting what that message is on goal setting and how to be present and what's important in life and finding your priorities to kids, middle school and high school kids, some colleges. I was doing a lot of keynote speaking, and just most of it for free. I just was crafting the message, which ended up becoming my first book, which is Grab Tomorrow, Your Best Year Ever. And that was what, kind of sent things on this path towards, regardless of life circumstances, I'm going to be a servant leader. I'm going to give, I'm going to help, I'm going to provide for other people, and mine will come eventually. And it wasn't like immediate. Like, that was hard work. I was running my direct sales business. I was campaigning. I was doing book signings and speaking engagements. Like, it was a lot. But eventually, when I fell in love with my now wife, I said, there's no way I could sustain this lifestyle and then also be a husband and a present father. And that's when I hired a business coach to figure out what direction should I take. And one of the conversations we have is, what do you want the one thing to be? And I said, I don't have a one thing, but here's what I do know. I want to create a business that ends up being a machine. And that machine is to buy me time. And then I want to take the money from that business to go into passive investments, so that money buys me more money. And then that money gives me money, my business gives me time, and now I can go have location freedom. So that's the 3x freedom that a lot of people think is rich. So that way I can pair this beautiful, like, fulfillment, gratitude piece, a lot of this work that I've already done, navigating through some of these challenging seasons, pair that with the 3X freedom. Now I'm going to be better than rich. And he actually is who started the company. And then he was my coach. And now we're business partners on this brand because I was his first student and his first client. And I just did a really great job. He's like, cool. I actually asked him, I said, I need to replace my wife's income in September 10th, 2021. I said, do you think we could partner up and teach other business owners how to do this? He's like, let's find out. So that was the birthplace of what we're doing now with Better Than Rich. So that's the origin story that some people might not know. But to the actual question is when someone says I'm trying, I want to be rich. It's like, first off, if you want to be better than rich, you got to figure out what does it mean to you to be rich. And some people say rich is happiness. Well, that's bogus because, how do you define happiness? I think that's an escape. How do you describe it? Like describe happiness. And a lot of times people would, they might say deep, meaningful friendships with people I care about. It's like, okay, how do you define that? What does it mean? How do you know that you have a deep, meaningful friendship with someone? What does it mean to have connection? And ask the second, third, fourth, fifth question. Go deep, 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 deep. And oftentimes, as people want to avoid pain or pursue pleasure, they want to have these feelings that being rich gives them. The feeling of freedom, the feeling of choice, the feeling of options. That's what they really want. And oftentimes, money buys that, which is great. And also, whatever money is buying, it's the feelings of those things that we actually want. It's not the thing itself. So we can try to anchor into those feelings. And what's beautiful about that like science experiment on ourselves is we feel the thing first and then get the thing second. So if we feel the thing first as if we already have whatever it is that we want. So if I want that new car, we close our eyes. It's like, I already feel the feelings of the wows and the awes and like, holy crap, good job, the recognition, the validation. If I could feel and imagine if all that has already come to me, I already got the thing. Now it's just a matter of going to actually in the outside world to go picking it up. I already got the emotions inside of me. Now I get to go into the outside world and pick it up. Easier said than done, but that's a practice of what it means to feel the feelings of being rich without having the richness in the outside world. And oftentimes that's what's better than being rich, is being present, is being finding the joy in each moment, regardless of the outside world, because I'm living in the inside world. And that's the practice. It's a journey. It's not like a destination.
I'd be curious to know when you speak of this, one thing that comes to mind is things around the law of attraction. Is that similar to what we're talking about here?
So it's a good question. I love the law of attraction. I love The Secret. I've studied it. I've played it and watched it probably 12 to 15 times for my sales team. I mean, I'm a big fan. And from like more work that I've done studying the law of attraction, it's closing my eyes, feeling the feeling. And then it doesn't just like open my eyes and it shows up. So there's a law of attraction plus action, right? I think that's like a little piece that needs to also be like a asterisk there. So it's not like I sit on the couch and things just start flowing to me. It's I feel the feelings and then I go pursue the outside world with those emotions. So there is the action part on the law of attraction that also needs to be there. And I think I don't want to stay too woo-woo, fluffy-duffy type of like, hippie type of mantras of just everything is all chill, bro. Like it is. And we also need to take aggressive pursuit on the things that we go after that we planted in those spring season and grind our tails off in the summer season. Like we still need to do those things. So it's a good question.
Nice. Well, I like that we're kind of tailing into this action space. So we talked a lot about like mindset and things that we can do to support ourselves throughout, this journey of being an entrepreneur. Now, you worked 20 years in direct sales. By the way, were you selling a product that I would be familiar with?
It was called Cutco cutlery, kitchen knives.
I love Cutco.
We
had
Cutco kitchen knives.
My God, I had the gentleman the giftology. John Rowland, he's been on the show, and he was talking about all these Cutcos. My mom's got some Cutco knives, absolutely love them. That was like
they're great.
First introduction to quality, and I do think it's a great, what's fascinating is I've had a few guests that were former Cutco reps, and now yourself included, and it seems like an organization that really instilled great habits, training, and success within people. So how much of that do you think has played a part in shaping some of your character and beliefs when it comes to success and business?
Huge. Started selling at 18 years old, and I was an engineering student at the University of South Florida, and pretty much everything that I learned about sales, business, psychology, human behavior, investing, I mean, it all came from the management training, the leadership training, the sales training. Everything that I got was paramount compared to anything that I got from traditional education. I'm glad I have my degree, but it's a lot of self-learning, because in sales, it's tough to like navigate the emotions, the ups and downs, and stay in equanimity every single time. There's a good result, let's stay in equilibrium. If there's a bad result, let's stay in equilibrium and just focus on the tiny actions daily and win the mental game. Like, that is such a great analogy for life. So it helped me tremendously, overcoming and winning and success and recognition. And the beautiful part about the vector marketing and Cutco Cutlery model is that every manager was a sales rep. So they're only training from within. So they've all went through it. So they're all teaching from their experiences, and they're compensated based on how well the others do. So it's not like a multi-level. It's like, I'm going to recruit you, and I'm going to also show you and teach you exactly how to do it. So training 5,000 people to do what I did. I mean, I graduated college. I paid myself through school. I made over 6 figures as a college kid. It was a great lucrative opportunity, plus the experience and the impact that it's had for so many individuals. So people like Hal Elrod and John Rulin and John Vroman and John Burgoff and, John Israel. These are some really great friends and acquaintances that Justin Donald, that I've had a chance to grow up with in the business for 20 years, but see what they've done outside of the business to have such a large impact is amazing of what it could do for a young person. So if somebody's listening to this and they have a 17 to 20-year-old, or if they're in that age range themselves, I highly recommend them to get into something like Cutco or Vector Marketing or Student Work Program that teaches them sales, entry-level customer sales and service, show and tell type of presentation. It is so foundational. My kids will sell Cutco for at least the summertime. I know we got a little ways to go, but they will do it at least for one summer.
I'm so happy to hear that, because obviously direct sales gets sometimes a bad rep, and there's reasons and companies that definitely deserve the bad rep. But what I kind of see as a measuring stick for the success of a direct sales organization is looking at the success of their members outside of that direct organization. And when I look at something like Cutco and, the outflow of people of incredible talent and skill that have been kind of going through that system and then applying them into other verticals, to me is a testament to a great organization. I would say probably another one I would put in that bucket would be something like College Pro Painters. I think there was a lot of people that went through that and had some good success. So I definitely am happy to hear how that's had an impact. For me, I ended up doing real estate sales on the phone. That was one of the first things that got me over the fear of sales, understanding that equanimity, everything you spoke about. This is what I'm hoping to inspire people when they hear about selling with love, so they don't fear sales and they realize that it's a lovely thing that really supports your success in life.
Agreed 100%.
Brother, the last thing I wanted to kind of cover is the fact that right now, as we're talking about, a lot of the initiatives you've taken to automate, systemize your business, and it's pretty incredible that you're able to do the things and not have the business be so dependent on you. We're in an age where there's a whole lot of technology that's coming out that's making this system of automation even more accessible. I mean, we have access to talent around the world. There are tools around AI that's really ramping up production and helping us do some things. I know you play a lot with that, and you help a lot of organizations use those kinds of tools. You've used them yourself as well. What would be some of the things we should be paying attention to as business owners or salespeople that can help us really leverage ourselves in today's time?
So the short answer is the technology and the team is a huge part of the equation, but it's the last 2 parts of the equation. I know 10x is easier than 2x. Who Now How, Gap in the Gain, Dan Sullivan's work, highly recommend, and his Who Now How is a great resource. I highly recommend it. I love it. And if we take team and tech and put it into a broken system, sometimes it doesn't solve the problem unless you're paying premium for experts that are who's. Expert who's are a large investment, and expert level technology is also a large investment. So my philosophy is McDonald-ify what it is that you are installing the team and the tech into, the system and the playbook. McDonald-ifies it, simplify it, make it as easy as possible for someone who is a lower wage worker to do. So there's a high level of predictability in the business system itself. So when you're installing the team in the tech, the business is not dependent on the who's and the technology. The business is dependent on the infrastructure, the playbooks that are built. It's almost like you can take a team, like a sports franchise that has consistent wins with different people, different players on the team. It's because the players of the team, not that they didn't matter, it was important, but the playbooks, the play, the coach, the organization, the culture, the skills, like that piece of the business was what created a long-term sustainable success beyond the players and sometimes even beyond the coach. So that's why I have the time-rich 6, which is boundaries, which is protecting your priorities, communication guidelines, rules of engagement, systems, your series of processes and if-thens, your playbooks, which are your documented resources, then your team, which are your who's, and then your tech, which is the tools that you're going to provide to your who's. So it's like that's the way that served me, and I kind of broken it down as that time-rich 6, so that way business owners don't try to get that magic pill or let me get that key hire that's going to make the difference, because that key hire might make a difference until they're not there anymore. And now you're dependent on a who that's no longer in your organization. And let me get that technology, but then that technology goes away or it's outdated. Now your business is reliant on something that doesn't exist anymore. So I would encourage them to build playbooks and build systems that are more reliable, scalable, sustainable, and key there is predictability.
Well, that definitely is kind of the reality check around the shiny object that seems to be the panacea we go for when we see a problem. But there's really some foundations that you can definitely work on. I'm going to make sure that for everybody listening in, we're going to put a link to the show notes so you can actually explore a whole lot more of Mike's material, including all of his books that can support with this. And I'm going to suggest that you actually go and pay attention to the Better Than Rich podcast, because it's going to help you with a lot of these aspects of building the right systems, McDonald-ifying, as we just talked about, so that if you are looking to scale, you want to do it predictably and you want to make sure the foundation is good. There's going to be a ton of insights that you're going to be able to extract from Mike as you go into that ecosystem. Mike, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure having a conversation. We've talked on a few topics, but there's one thing I do want to ask for everybody that does come on the show, and I want to ask you as well. You are on the Selling with Love podcast, so I wanted to ask you, what does selling with love mean to you?
Selling with love is selling from a place of knowing, deep knowing that what I'm doing for them is more congruent than what it's doing for me. So I have a high level of personal congruency that they get the better end of the deal than me. And I will not sell a product if I don't believe that. So I need to believe that first. So making sure that I know that they're getting the better end of the deal of me. Personal congruency is what shows up for me when I hear selling with love.
That is awesome. Honestly, Mike, this is why I want to bring you on the show. That's why I had a good time going on your show as well. Where you have your values, where you have your mind, and what you're teaching for people and the difference you're making in the world is exactly the kind of sales that I'm trying to encourage people to model. And so I'm so excited to have you come on the show and share your journey, your insights. And I know we just touched the tip of the iceberg. I just want to recap for everybody. We've talked about a few things that I want you to be able to take with you and take away. One of them is just understanding the cycle of seasons that Mike spoke about at the beginning. I think this is a very useful tool to just acknowledge where we're at based on the circumstances of our life. And just because you're looking at somebody's summer and you might not be necessarily at the same place doesn't mean that you should just jump back into summer. There might be some different steps to take. And I think that what we broke down with Mike about what to do in all these different seasons might help you understand what are the most important tasks for you to do, to either be planting seeds, reviewing the seeds you got, or to just be on the hustle, or maybe just finding something to bring back your energy so that the next cycle that comes around, you're ready to tackle it forward in a powerful way. We talked about moving away from on self and on purpose. I mean, obviously we had some information from Tony Robbins here, but honestly, those tools have been super, super powerful in Mike's life, and seeing how if we're just finding ourselves in a slump, if you get back to serving, doing things that contribute often is going to be what brings back some of those long-term fuelers like oxytocin or endorphins, and not just going for those quick wins that often fizzle away and make us chase the next high. I think there's a lot of activities that we could be doing to have that baseline so that we're excited, because guess what? We talked about sales, and you can get really excited when things go well. You can get really dragged down when things don't go so well. So finding that equanimity, this is something I took away as a reminder from our conversation today, Mike. And I hope for everybody else, they understand that if you have these good habits that are in place, you're always in in place of service, you're going to have a better baseline in the process. Lots of tech is coming out. There's teams that can solve some instant problems, but we want to focus on what is the blueprint, what is the process, and what are those foundations that really are going to help you build the type of business that you can master, get good at, and really be able to replicate and scale in the process, because it's not just about making money for today, but building that passivity, knowing that you're covered in the harder times. And of course, finally, I want to close with what you said, which was one of the most important skills at the foundation of all of this, which is get comfortable with sales. Try to fall in love with it. You can see how sales have served Mike by going into direct sales himself, how it's actually been something he's been able to sprinkle in every initiative that he's taken, allowing him to make the impact he's wanted and the contribution. And when you learn to sell as well, you'll be able to do the same. Take a moment to go and subscribe to the Better Than Rich podcast and go and check out Mike. We'll put a link to his website as well. Tons of resources, tons of books, and programs to help you automate your business as well. I'd encourage you to go check all of that out. And of course, as you continue to go out there, keep selling with love. Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.